management. So here's my question. This is what runs my life. Everybody understands relationship. Some people don't understand management or economy, but everybody understands relationship. What does it take for your best friend, for your business partner, for your spouse, for your mother, your father? What does it take to create a successful relationship? Every single person on earth considers that question. Well, I ask you, what is the most important relationship for life on earth? And it's the relationship between the Mother Earth that birthed us and supplies everything. End of story. Supplies everything. And its greatest predator, human beings. The greatest relationship, the most fundamental relationship, I should say, is between nature and humans. How are we going to make that work? Are we going to make it work in a dysfunctional manner, which is what what the model of progress has gotten us? One way. What happens to your best friend when you steal from them and keep stealing from them and don't give them anything? They just tell you to buzz off. What happens in a marriage? You get a divorce. So, essential question. If we have a vision of a equitable, carbon neutral, nature positive world, what relationship with nature will it take to make it happen? I'm going to go through a couple of different examples here. Nature Needs Half is a vision that we launched in 2009 based on science and based on relationship. One of the best ways to create a successful relationship is to share. Oh, here, you can have some of my food. Oh, thank you for giving me some of yours. How can I help you? Very basic questions. I never even use the word management. So nature needs half. What does it mean? It's what science tells us, really, that all of these large natural ecosystems, if they get below approximately half, and it depends on the ecosystem. If they get too small, the Amazon, for example, if it gets below 80%, it breaks down. And we're getting there. Other ecosystems, 30 to 40%. So what we say, half. Let's call it half. And it's the seas as well. Sylvia Earle, the great aquanaut, marine biologist, explorer, wonderful, wonderful person. She says, don't forget the blue heart. Huh? Great woman. So nature needs half is land and sea. Jane Goodall, when we launched, this is 2009 in Mexico at the 9th World Wilderness Congress, when we launched Nature Needs Half. This is what she said about it. And I have to tell you that Sylvia was there, Jane was there, policymakers, indigenous leaders. So we launched this vision because right then the target for protecting the earth was 17%, and we hadn't even made it. So we had a really interesting ride for a couple of years. People called us naive, impossible, because targets had been set on what nature conservation organizations felt was politically possible and permissible. I have emails. I have one framed in my office from a very prominent scientist that says, You might be right about nature needs half, but I cannot say it because we will be laughed in our face. All we're trying to do is save life on Earth by using science and using the science of relationship. Thank you for giving me some food. How can I help you? Well, 7 years later, Professor Ed Wilson, who sadly just passed a few months ago, he produced this book, Half Earth, about the same thing. And suddenly the idea began to get currency because it wasn't just a bunch of regular old NGOs, civil society organizations, the Wild Foundation and its wilderness addicts, freaks, supporters. This was the world's top scientists saying, no, this is important, and it's based on science. So it began to get traction. Let's boil it down. Let's just say, why do we do this? Well, one is because nature produces ecological services, right? What are ecological services? Just forget about that jargon. It's life support. The Earth supports us. Air, water, biodiversity, climate control, weather patterns, all comes from Gaia, which is also a proven concept now. Self-regulating mechanism that produces the services that make life possible. Well, there's another thing, because there's so many human beings and we're crowding up everything, we need to have connectivity between these areas that we protect. And what is connectivity? It creates relationship. It allows wildlife to move up and down, across, through water, whatever. So ecological services, life support, and relationship, okay? This is one of the sad things as we've developed, that this is what happens. The wildlife have no place to go. So there is a movement on now, and you have it in India. See, this was the first big wildlife crossing across a major highway. This is in Banff National Park. And it was a huge success. And now they're beginning to spread around. You know, the big issue in India, of course, is train tracks and trains and elephants and the terrible carnage that happens. Well, this is the case all over the world. We're not managing nature very well. We're not taking care of it. So why should it not be that it's a law? Just like when you make a road and the law says you have to show that it drains properly. Part of that should be the road should have wildlife overpasses and underpasses. End of story. That's us saying to nature, how can I help you? Because you helped me. So these are called nature-based solutions. We don't just, this is very simple technology, putting a big culvert underneath a road so wildlife can go through it, or building a little bridge. It's very simple. So we went from that original concept of progress, and we saw what the IPCC said. Now we're starting to talk. Nature-based solutions are a new sort of progress. But if we want to protect half, we have to ask a couple of questions, really simple questions, right? I mean, everybody says, what people, I tell you, I've had this for 12 years now. No, we can't do that in our country. We have too many people. India can't do it. Or people say, we're too poor. We need to feed our people first, and then we'll worry about nature later. Look where that's gotten us, okay? Well, a couple of years ago, a very good study came out. See, the thing is, nature needs half is not jurisdictional. It's ecological. And all the science shows us that we can do this. And the three conditions basically looks at most of the countries in the world and says that there are these three general conditions. And that in the large wild areas, we need to protect them now. Okay, they're still diminishing. And then in those shared lands, we can do corridors. Okay. Still have protected areas, but do corridors. And then in the areas where there's cities and farms, we can still do corridors. It's just more intensive. We can work in each of these, but the high value is protect what is left. And then you can connect and you can restore. And a lot of people say, oh, Nature Needs Half is going to rob all the indigenous people. That's absolutely wrong. Nature Needs Half is based on a different relationship with our indigenous brothers and sisters. And there's fine examples of it. This is the Decho people up in northern Canada. They have saved over half of their very large native land, the Decho conservation lands. Namibia, Southwest Africa, 42% protected. Right? It's not rich white people doing this. Namibia is also the only country in the world that's protected their entire coastline. And that's phenomenal. Plus a lot of marine protected areas, 12,000 square kilometers worth. It's a great example. Nature Needs Half does not exclude anybody. It includes everybody, and especially indigenous people, because they still occupy 24% of the wildlands, which contain 80% of the most valuable biodiversity left on Earth. But what about those areas that are all built up? Like this is Hong Kong, this is Kowloon. This is what most people think, right, of Hong Kong. Well, this is actually Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, the territories, the new territories, all surrounding it is 46% protected area, parks, biodiversity reserves, marine protected areas. We can do this. Okay, this is one of these ugly slides on the World Conservation Congress, the IUCN. Here it was in 2010, I was told Nature Needs Half might be true, but we'll be laughed at if we say it. Well, we formed a coalition and it took 11, 12 years. And in France, in last September, we debated Nature Needs Half on the floor of the assembly. And this was adopted. And the first action point was recognizing the science about protecting or restoring half. And that 30%, in another action clause of this 30%, you might have heard this 30 by 30, is a milestone towards half. But the second operating clause is very important. And it just reiterates what I was saying earlier. This is not about a bunch of rich people who can have food and have a house and they can stay warm in the winter like I am now. This is about human survival. And trying to survive with some dignity and some grace and some sharing. Brand new, released on Monday. We saw that quote from 2007 from the IPCC. This is hot off the press on Monday. What do they say? 30 to 50% is essential. See that last two words? With high confidence, we need to do this. They're not saying we'll be laughed at. They're saying we have high confidence that this is a necessity. So that's Nature Needs Half. It's a lot about restoring and protecting. This Global Rewilding Alliance, this is part 2 of examples of what we can do, okay? This came out of the planning for the 11th World Wilderness Congress that Dr. Panja mentioned. You know, we planned for almost 2 years, spent a lot of money. And then nature struck. You know, it was really interesting. One of our main speakers at that Congress was going to be David Quammen. And he, of course, wrote the famous book Spillover about zoonotic viruses spilling over from animals to humans. And he wrote that 10 years ago, and he was going to come and speak about that in Jaipur. So, but out of the planning, we had a charter for rewilding the earth, and out of that came a global alliance. It just happened to dovetail with the declaration of this decade as the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. So let's just look a little bit about what is rewilding, what is restoration, okay? Here's a little video.
Are you ready to be part of something wild? Something incredible. It's called rewilding, and it's already underway. We are millions of people, a turning tide, from doorstep to delta, summit to sea, across every continent. Now is the time to act, to protect, restore, and rewild the living world. All life depends on our actions. Now, we are all part of nature, within its intricate web of life. If it heals, so do we. People and wildlife can thrive together. Let's change our future and leave this earth better and more beautiful than we found it. Are you ready to rewild our world? Are you ready?
So that's just a little, we released that last year on the launch of the UN Decade. I want to give a couple of examples here in India of rewilding, restoration. This is the cocoon work done by us, the Sanctuary Foundation. All of you know Sanctuary, and Dr. Panja, this is really about using clapped out farmland, bring it back, corridors for tigers, economy for local people. It all works together. There are many examples throughout India. I'm only giving 2 here. In fact, 3. This is Pradeep Krishan's work in Jaipur, and he focuses on soil types, and what plants are best and natural for that soil type. Really super interesting type of rewilding. And I want to give one more example here of a really inspiring one that actually won the Sanctuary Nature Award. And it's an urban example.
Dear members of I Am Gurgaon, restorers, reclaimers, the hands that held a seed and felt the weight of the tree it can be. You laid eyes on a land deprived of life and stripped of its soul. You looked towards a quarry site, a dumping yard. There you saw a forest, thrumming with life, alive with the sound of birds and trees swaying in the breeze. And so there began your colossal effort to rewild this 380-acre forest land in Gurugram. You rallied for volunteer support among civilian groups and collaborated with municipal authorities and corporates. Soon, splashes of green began to appear in this sea of gray and brown. You organized seed collection drives and urged masses to breathe life to an oasis such as this, a green jewel between the thirsty cities of Delhi and Gurugram. Today, here exists a mosaic of micro-habitats and a flourish of 300 native plants, besides the presence of 201 species of birds. Today, This miracle of a lung space is called the Aravali Biodiversity Park, Gurugram. Dear members of I Am Gurgaon, for being revolutionary urban rewilders, for showing us what a people's movement can do, for embodying the best of Gurugram. Thank you.
Lovely, inspiring story. I want to thank them, and I want to thank Sanctuary Nature for allowing me to show that video. Okay, this is our last little bit. I'm going to rush through it a little bit because I have one final video. What we're working on right now is something that most people don't know about, and it's the importance of wildlife in mitigating carbon and helping address the climate crises, climate breakdown crises. It's called Animating the Carbon Cycle, and I'm going to show you a little video, and then we're just about done.
Earth breathes carbon. With every breath, its oceans, forests, and wildlife absorb carbon from the atmosphere. Animals are the missing link between biodiversity and the climate, and they've been neglected. Like an enormous sponge, the forest and the ocean soak up vast amounts of carbon. You may think vegetation is the king of carbon inhalation, but it's not quite so simple. The exchange of carbon is dynamic, flowing effortlessly across the web of life. An intimate relationship exists between carbon and biodiversity. Meet a gentle forest giant, an ocean-dwelling mammal, and a resilient grassland roamer. These are some of the climate heroes who help regulate the carbon cycle. The newt, otherwise known as the wildebeest, over 1 million of them used to roam the Great Serengeti, trampling and grazing the grassland, returning carbon-rich plant matter to the soil, until one day people introduced cattle. These farm animals introduced disease that wiped out 70% of the wildebeest population. The after effects were catastrophic. The once grazed grass now grew tall and wild, inviting fires that tore through the landscape, ravaging 80% of the ecosystem and creating a large source of CO2 emissions every year. Through years of conservation work, wildebeest have returned. The relationship has been restored, and the Serengeti is now a carbon sink. It absorbs more carbon than it releases, enough to offset emissions in both Kenya and Tanzania. Our next hero shelter is deep in the dense Central African rainforest. A herd of forest elephants moves slowly through the underbrush, devouring shrubbery in their path. Destroying plants may seem counterproductive, but actually it reduces competition for the large canopy trees that block away more carbon. If more herds like this return to Central Africa, they could help absorb 85 million tons of carbon each year. That's France's total annual carbon emission from fossil fuels. 1,000 miles away in cool ocean waters, a whale cruises through the light zone. Like other whales, she excretes valuable nutrients at the surface before diving down to feed. The phytoplankton benefit from her waste, using it to photosynthesize and absorb carbon. When these tiny creatures die, they sink to the ocean floor, safely storing the carbon. If we help replenish whale population, they could take up to 450 million tons of carbon. That's equal to more than annual emissions of all Africa. Animate means bring to life. Rewilding reanimates the carbon cycle. It's the solution that works with nature to decrease carbon levels and regulate the climate. A fact indigenous communities have known for millennia, and the reason why they are key partners in the effort to rewild the natural world. We must work with nature to solve the crisis we face. Nature is our ally. It's time to rewild.
So I'm ending up now, and just back to where we started. What's our vision? and maybe a new way to look at it. How shall we steward the earth? How shall we be a partner? How do we create a relationship? Management is fine, but it needs to be a two-way street. I want to thank you very much. You are our future, and I'm very happy to be here with you, and I thank you. Dr. Pandya, over to you.
Thank you so much, Vance, for this lovely insight. I have unpinned you, so participants, you can go into the gallery view or speaker side by side so that you can see everyone in the audience as well. Well, Vance, I didn't want to startle you by saying that our dear friend Bittu Sehgal is also here. You can
Very
Brother
good.
Bittu.
Vance, always come away after listening to you and you fill in so many blanks. I've lived for so long. I've done so much, like edited magazines for 40 years, and yet you give me nuggets of information. I am so happy these young people here have had an opportunity to listen to you. You're the man that knew that winter was coming, even though in a global warming world, that analogy might be different.
Thank you, my brother.
Parvesh?
Sir, if students don't have any pressing questions, I have one for Vance right away. Can I go? So Vance, in India, kind of plantation is right now a big thing. It may be, government initiatives, or it may be big corporations funding plantation drives through the CSR. How do you think plantation drives are different from rewilding?
Well, thank you. It's a very good question and very simple. This is one of the dangers of the concept of restoration and rewilding. In people's mind is just plant trees. And I am a tree person. That's what I loved first. And I still return to trees for wisdom and for strength. But trees are important this much. A forest is important this much, right? And what we need to do is replant forests. For example, what the Balipara Foundation is doing up in Assam. They are replanting, but it's on a scientifically derived model where they have 17 to 35 species that they're interacting. So what we have to do is recreate the biodiversity or recreate a framework of planting in which nature can start to work and rewild. That's her magic. She can rewild and create the biodiversity in the soil, which is so important, as well as the general environment. Plantations themselves have had a role, but what we really need are forests. Thank you.
That brings me to another question as you were talking, that is rewilding better, or is it better to leave nature to itself?
Well, you have a number of things. Right now, I believe we're in an emergency. So we need to assist nature. Some people call it manage. We need to assist nature and sometimes bring wildlife back in. We have already hammered a lot of land on this earth, and there's many studies that shows where those lands are. One of the great examples of restoration, not rewilding, is in Western China, the Loess Plateau. John D. Liu has brought 1 million hectares back through restoration by doing one thing, paying attention to the soil and saving water. And the whole thing has bloomed again, blossomed again, 1 million hectares. Now, it's restoration, and restoration is generally focused on bringing hammered land or wasted seas back to production, back to healthy life, lots of biodiversity, but it's producing for humans. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not rewilding per se. We like to get rewilding to a point where we say there's three important steps: protect what's left, restore everything we can for human beings, and then rewild. And rewild is really aimed at nature and natural evolution so that it eventually becomes what is called a self-willed system. We're respecting the intelligence and the spirit of nature by rewilding.
Super. In fact, the participants of this program, Vance, you'll be very happy to know that on 13th of March, they have yet to know about this, but we are organizing in every place wherever they are, whether they are in Kashmir or in Guwahati or in Baroda or anywhere, wherever they are, they will have a field outing, preferably to a rewilded location or a place, and actually see. That's the fallout of your lecture, of this
Wonderful
discussion that you did with them.
That inspires me.
So I really love this word assist rather than manage or trying to just trying to really do plantations or trying to do something where we feel more powered than nature, and to just do everything on our own, that we will plant forests or something. So I really like that word assist. But what I mean, what I want to ask is, so rewilding may be easy or okay to do in, say, temperate regions, maybe like North America or Europe, or where taiga forests are, where there are few species and the larger landscapes may be homogeneous. But in places like India, in the tropical forests or subtropical regions, will rewilding really work? Because when I go to forests, sometimes they are so complex that we don't ourselves understand the composition many times, and it is so varied. So you go to a different elevation and it suddenly changes. You go to a different slope or a different part of the hill and it will be completely different. How do you really decide that, whether this is okay going ahead with a certain strategy of rewilding or no? And there is always this danger of letting certain other species, which may be fast growing or which
Yes.
may be better at adapting to a certain condition, to grow more and to grow quicker than other species, which may be actually important in the entire ecosystem. How do you really decide that?
Well, this is part of our learning.
Right.
People thought eucalyptus trees were a big solution because they grew fast and they provided wood and fiber and all this kind of stuff. Human beings are learning all the time. Humility, observation, correction, evolution. That's all I can say.
But you really think that the value of at least starting with the rewilding processes in destroyed habitats is way better than letting it just grow on its own?
I think right now, yeah. I think because we're in an emergency.
Yes, I agree.
So let's get things going. The most basic thing, though, if you have a piece of hammered land, is you on a slope, you put a little bund. You pay attention to the water. Put the water into the soil. Don't let it run off. That is the essential #1 key to restoring and rewilding. If you do nothing else, capture that water, slow it down, stop erosion, and then watch what nature will do.
I think that's brilliant. That's lovely to start with.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Vance, if I may interject here, that there is a misconception that rewilding is replanting. It isn't replanting. Right. Rewilding uses the gardens of Eden. It gives them place. In other words, you have bees, you have butterflies, you have beetles, you have elephants, you have monkeys. These are the ones that scatter the seeds. What nature really wants from us when we rewild in a country like India is to make sure that in the Anthropocene, that human beings don't adversely impact. When we fall sick, we go to an ICU, an intensive care unit. This whole planet now is an ICU. It's an intensive conservation unit. And you're saying, like the liver, you can abuse the liver up to a point, you can use the liver up to a point, but it has to come back. And it won't come back if you go beyond the point. So I would say, Saurabh, to your very, very key point, that the young people who are here, apart with my real heartfelt apology, I'm sorry for what my generation has done to your world, but I want to assure you that what Vance spoke to you about just now, the solutions are there, and you will live a life where you will find the things that my generation destroyed coming back to life, provided we understand that the gardeners of Eden, जो हम हिंदी में कहते हैं कि वन के माली, the bees, the butterflies, the elephants, the plethora of life, even the soil microflora, even the tick on the back of the tiger, these are the creatures that will really bring the wilderness back to us. But we have to change our ambition, Vance, and like the liver, one other analogy, that if I love alcohol and I drink too much of it, I'm going to become very, very sick. And if the doctor tells me, look, you're an alcoholic, you have to stop drinking the whiskey that you drink. And I say, yes, I'll stop drinking the whiskey that I drink. I'll just switch to rum. It doesn't work. We have to understand that we have to flow with nature. And that is what Vance has been doing all his life. Frankly, today it is possible for you young people to undo the damage, not necessarily by going out and planting, but stopping other human beings from damaging this self-repairing machine, this homeostasis that we see. Everything comes back. Allow it to come back. In the intensive care unit, you're not, give me 10, run, jump around, you're giving it a rest. Give the planet a rest, it'll come back magically.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bittu. Magic stuff, wildness.
Any more questions? Audience, students?
So I had a question. I actually wanted to know more about a few more examples as far as rewilding or nature needs half. If there were a few more examples that so you could share with us, so that we know that it's worked better around the world.
Oh, there are many. I encourage you to go to rewildingglobal.org. And our alliance has a few, 130, and there's many examples around the world, but everything from the very big scaled operations in Europe, Rewilding Europe is massively scaled and helping local communities, bringing back wildlife, allowing nature to respond. There are wolves now in every nation in continental Europe. Part of it is that nature's rewilding itself because people are leaving the land. The experiment of 300 years ago, where cities were awful and people left the cities and they went to the mountains and they created little farms on largely marginal land. Well, that experiment has failed, and so many people are coming back to the cities. The forests are coming back, 50 million hectares. And as the forests come back, this is what Brother Bittu is saying. Nature's doing it, right? Well, Rewilding Europe is coming in. They're adding some of the old herbivores that are helping to take care of the grasses and the trees, adding some dung, spreading seeds. So that's big work. Tompkins Conservation in Argentina and Chile, one of the most inspiring rewilding, huge scaled up efforts in the world. So go to rewilding.org and have a look.
Thank you, sir. I actually had another question, if you don't mind.
Okay, as long as we have the time, I don't want to keep you too long.
I just wanted to know, in a country like India, how do you pull locals on board with something like this? Because they're going to lose land. With larger predators, they might lose cattle. It's a concern for them.
There's the expert at answering that is right there, Mr. Bichusego, please.
Sidhaant, it's like this. What you're saying is absolutely right. The first thing is that if you're looking for a rewilding success story, then from the biodiversity point of view, you need look no further than Project Tiger. When you started Ranthambore, please trust me, I was there. I saw 30,000 cattle in there. I saw devastated land. There was no water. People were migrating. Everything was a problem. At that point, we made a mistake. We did not get the communities involved, precisely what you're saying right now. And the end result was all our successes, Vance. Every time the tiger population went up, the deer population went up, it was the people living on the edges of those parks that paid the heaviest price. Their crops were raided, their animals were killed, sometimes they were attacked. So right now, what we're doing with the Cocoon Conservancy concept is community-owned, community-operated nature conservancy. Now, in India, we know we don't normally go to the supermarket to buy curd. You know, we just take jamun thoda leke, hum dalte, and then that turns into our dahi. If we look at our existing national parks and sanctuaries, the ones which are already biodiverse, and treat them like ballpen marks, and we want to turn them into ink blots, we need to make sure that the people who live around these become the primary beneficiaries of a returned biodiversity. It's easier said than done, but quite frankly, there is no other way. And this is the way we are going right now. This is the way that India will not only rewild, but India will probably find solutions to its climate crises like photosynthesis. I mean, the carbon cycle is controlled by plants. Those plants come back. If those people become the primary beneficiary, if we put them at the bottom of the rung and say that, look, after we've eaten everything else and we throw a few scraps your way, it won't work. I think, Sidhaant, that your generation will do what my generation failed to do, which is rewild with equitable justice, social justice, climate justice. It's very, very easy. Actually, the tough part of it is, how do we change the ambitions of those 10 people who control the fortunes of 90 people plus the rest of the biosphere? It's not an easy delivery, but it's a clear-cut solution. And if nature, which is asking us now to kneel in prayer, if we don't kneel in prayer, it will make us kneel in subjugation, and the damage we do, we will be prevented from doing. Whether it's cyclones, whether it's floods, whether it's we kill ourselves, whether it's wars, these are the results of resource deprivation. And resource deprivation really comes down to land, water, and air. These are the things with climate change that are being deprived, we are being deprived of. We will set ourselves against each other, but that is also the cement that will join us across not just India, but across the oceans. There will be no difference. It's a small blue marble, just this small. All history took place on this small blue marble we call planet Earth. On behalf of Sanctuary, I can tell you that Parvesh Pandya, Dr. Pandya, Saurav Sawant, all the other people in Sanctuary, we will show you, we will act as guideposts. And eventually, in the next few months, in the next few years, we will work with you. And you, young, beautiful, young children, you not only have the legitimacy to ask that nature needs half, we want to leave nature and give it half, but you also have that great gift. You're not as cynical as my generation is, and you should be more trusting. Listen to what Vance said right now. Please believe me, you will be happy every day of your life, because all the things we damage will come back, and you will not do it. Nature will do it, and you will work with nature. And I could go on, but I won't.
We have a last question from Bennett, please. Okay, so she says Bitu's just answered that. Fine.
Well, I'd still like to know her question or his.
Bennett, please go ahead.
Actually, my hi to all. Actually, my question was starting from like how Sir has started that does nature need to be managed? But we have reached to a point like from various sources from past few days that by 2050, that nature will be managing us. So I think Bitu Sir has rightly mentioned it. So So yeah, it's a little bit answered my question.
Vance.
Thank you. Closing comment from me.
Yeah.
We are, what Bitchy says is exactly true. Let us realize that we have left you a mess. We have also left you some tools. Nature has consequences. Nature is not good or bad. We love nature, but to us, nature has consequences. That's what we're going to experience. And the good news is that right now, we here, and all of you especially, you were born for this moment. You were born to save the earth. And I thank you and I love you for it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Vance. Thank you, Bittu. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We'll see you very soon. The next session is already pasted in the WhatsApp group as well as in the email. Thank you so much for being here. God bless you.
Thank you.